Excelsior! Welcome everybody, Geeks of the Round Table, Feature 5 Media. Stanley passing this year, such a great Marvel pop culture, big influence on a lot of people's lives, especially in the movies the last couple of years, all the superhero movies. Let's talk about him, let's give our respects, let's give our shout out. Stanley, go.
All right. It's been a trying week for the comic world, pop culture world in general. The Generalissimo is gone. Stan Lee is gone. We're going to be talking about this guy for the next while with the guys from the Geeks of the Round Table. What do you guys think of this week without Stan Lee?
Well, it's tragic. It's a tragic loss. I mean, he was a hero for us. He was an icon for us. I mean, and he made it to 95. So,
True.
Yeah, full life.
you know,
Yeah.
like that was
Like-
that was a good life.
I mean, it's still shocking, but people weren't really kind of like too taken aback. You know, they kind of were expecting it.
Yeah,
for a
at
while.
95, you know what I mean? We brought it up at work, we were talking with the guys and stuff like that, and everybody was like, oh, how'd he die? I'm like, man, he's 95.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You know, like,
exactly.
everybody wants to live as long as they can, but 95, what else can you ask for?
Not
Right?
only that, but he was pretty lucid and working until 95.
Pretty much.
Basically, very much.
Still doing his cameos. He's gonna be in Avengers 4.
Actually,
It's gonna be
yeah.
another 5 cameos. They said that they record.
Wow.
They've
Oh, yeah?
they've
Oh, really?
shooted for
Interesting.
five more
So
movies.
that's cool.
So he was
So-
still working pretty
Yeah.
good at
Yeah.
95.
Yeah.
No,
yeah,
it's
that's
it's
good.
hard because like I went through like the different emotions, kind of like sad at the beginning, then I was mad because obviously like people make fun of it or
The
like
5
come up
stages.
with bullshit.
Mm.
Yeah, 5
Mm,
stages.
5 stages.
And it's just like, you know, you look at it, some people look at him as a father figure, some people see them as like a grandfather, and then you look at him as a human being. And for me, it's just like the creator that he is
True.
was like, you know, it's just, it's great. You know,
Yeah.
he created like a lot.
Well, he
And we
created a universe.
A lot, yeah, basically, right?
You know,
Beyond the X-Men and Avengers, and now Fantastic Four, Silver Surfer. From there, Galactus.
Yeah, creative.
You know,
creative
very
creatively.
super
A genius,
creative
a
mind.
genius. I would
Genius.
say he's a genius.
Yeah, a lot of his characters and stuff like that, the comic books growing up, is what got me into reading pretty much. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I wasn't really
Me too,
interested
me
in
too,
that as a
me
young
too.
age, but those stories, they really hit home, you know? Spider-Man. you know?
Yeah, Spider-Man in itself, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the
Yeah.
first ones that I read.
Everybody
that I
connects
read.
with, yeah.
Yeah, everybody connects
A lot
with
of
because
pe-
the
yeah,
everyman,
everybody.
the everyman, and all
The
the
every
more,
boy.
every boy, and the moral lessons that it has
Well,
in
the,
it.
the basic characters of Marvel were between him and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, but they all had that gravitas of humanity. You know, that
Yes.
DC always had that godlike quality and you know that the superheroes always had, but Marvel decided to have like that connection to human.
Yeah,
so
it,
that
fe-
you
it
have your
always
superheroes.
felt more real, right? Like you
Yeah.
could definitely relate.
Well, he's more normality because of especially the X-Men. Like the X-Men, when they created the X-Men, it is more like the freaks and the outcasts and social
exactly.
outcasts and people, you know, racism and that whole
Yep.
jive. So they do that, and then they do the Avengers, which is like a group of like different people from different backgrounds coming together for like the greater good.
Yep.
And then you have Fantastic Four, which is like the family of Marvel, where they have different, you know, people to people who are related or but love each other or went to the same school.
But people didn't read these comics because they really wanted to get more like action. They go, hey, I'm gonna get the Fantastic Four because there's a lot of action and architecture and archaeology in a more space opera kind of way. But they wanted that, let's say, melodrama stuff that happened between those action, no? Like for example,
Yes.
especially with the Fantastic Four, it was cool because it was like a family and,
Yeah,
and the
exactly.
big brother and the small brother, kind of Ben Grimm and Johnny Storm.
Yeah,
and
Susan
then you have
Storm,
the,
yeah.
no, so it was like that.
Relationship.
The people wanted to see the relationship that they had between each other, and then there was the action parts and whatever. So there's always things that grab you, and I think he brought that in there. He actually brought that. I don't know if people give him that much of like he did all this
All the
instead of
credit?
just being the guy who was like charismatic and talking and making comics books cool, but he also was a creative genius in every sense of the word, because he also literary genius. No,
He wrote
beside
a
the
lot,
creative-
like a lot of
creative.
a lot of things that he wrote in Spider-Man and Silver Surfer.
Silver
and-
Surfer
and-
to him, if you when you ask him when he was alive, to him Silver Surfer was his masterpiece.
His magnus opus,
Well,
yeah.
his magnus
Yeah.
opus. And if you read
And that's-
the
and that's
first,
true.
the first is all about philosophical.
Well, he's the
no?
character is a pacifist, and then in itself
Yeah.
he becomes the herald of Galactus.
And he has to make
Which,
sense
which,
of.
which that in itself, like him writing the origin of Galactus as a comic, having the Watcher come in and intercede into saying that this is coming and all these things, because Galactus, that was pretty much the first. How could you say, like, DC has Final Crisis and Infinite Crisis on Infinite Earth. That was the first like big giant event that you had.
Yep.
Because Galactus back in the day was, I remember growing up that everybody talked about that. Oh, all powerful this and that, but Galactus, because Galactus at the time was the measuring stick for superpower.
Exactly.
in
He was the
universe.
Omega level.
He was the mega level guy before anything came that we have now, where we have different levels on that.
Well,
Insane.
isn't he super old as well? He comes from
He
like,
comes
the
from a different.
previous
He comes.
incarnation,
Yeah. So his
right?
name's Galen.
Yeah.
His
So
name's Galen, and he was born
In the
from
universe
the
before.
universe previous, before the
To
Big
this
Bang,
universe,
and then when the Big Bang happened, between the power cosmic, he becomes Galactus,
yeah.
and then the devourer of worlds, sorry, is because he needs to maintain the energy level that he has to be able
Right.
to
But
survive.
think about the
consuming
kind of
planets.
mind. Think about the kind of mind that you have to be to create such a character.
That's
to create
right.
the
Yeah.
idea of somebody
Exactly.
coming from
Yeah.
another universe
Exactly.
into a
For
new
so
one.
much length of time. Like
Yeah.
it's an incredible length of time that has a detailed history. Marvel and Stan the Man was great at creating such dynamically layered characters, and when you added the two partners with Kirby and Ditko, it really did just it blew up.
Yeah.
and it just went amazing.
Well, that's the thing, though. That it's not just you always all geniuses have to gravitate towards each other. All
Yeah.
artists the same. It's the same like in great pieces of art. Like they always influence each other. So having Ditko and Kirby there also as their drawings are just amazing.
Yeah.
There's splash pages in Spider-Man for the Sinister Six when they go through the gauntlet. When Spider-Man goes through the gauntlet of going through the Green Goblin and Kraven the Hunter and all these different characters, Doc
Yeah,
Ock.
but one by one. Yeah.
Yeah, one by one,
Great
right? And he
series.
goes and the Sandman and all these different great villains. His whole rogue gallery. It's like he doesn't just tell you the story of him going through that. It's also the emotional damage that he had, where it kind of led to where Peter Parker quits.
Yeah.
There's Spider-Man no more. When he literally, it's not that he stopped just being Spider-Man. He wanted to stop being Spider-Man as himself because it changed him, from the decisions that they made. And he threw out the costume, throws it in the trash.
Yeah.
And you have that great iconic, walking away cover in the comic. But it's the writing from Stan Lee that makes it great, because it conveys the emotions of what's happening around, and also because Spider-Man was always so lighthearted
Right.
before before the symbiote Venom kind of Secret Wars kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, he was always like pushing things forward, but I guess because he was so fun and kind of like the face of comic books, people kind of like didn't pay attention to the stuff that he was doing kind of like behind the scenes, because he was always pushing the stories forward, like he was trying to do stuff with. For example, I remember very clearly, in the 40s and 50s when the whole communism and they were trying to stop comic books from doing like too much violence and sex and this.
Yeah.
And
Oh, like the
that,
comic
and
code,
they
the
put
comic
co-
code, the
no,
comic
they put
code,
the comic
yeah.
code.
Yeah.
And I think by maybe the 70s they approached Marvel and say, okay, we need you to do something for the people, and Stan Lee say, well, let's do something about drugs. So he did like a story about drugs. Like everybody knows the story about drugs with the Spider-Man, whatever. The thing is, in order to teach about drugs, you have to talk about drugs. In the comic book, he was talking about drugs, shows it to the people, and they're like, no, you can have the word drugs in there, or people looking like drugs or whatever. He's like, you asked me for this, and now you're saying this, but Stanley was already like, okay, I read this.
He was against the code.
I
too.
did already this story, and I need to put it out. So he went to his editor, no? And he's always another thing that I love about Stanley is that even as an old person, he's always remembering his stories from back in the day, and people like us, probably even younger than us, would not remember or even care about names like that, but they were important in the comic book world. For example, Martin Goodman, who was the editor of Marvel, he showed them the story, say, this is happening, they don't want this drugs story. Say, you know what? Take the comic code's seal from there and just do it without the seal. No? Because they don't want to do it without the seal. And he was always proud of that. He always say, Martin Goodman backed me up forever, and I did that. When he put that thing in there, nobody remembers that, but he actually, with that comic book, was the comic book who actually broke the comic code authority. From that moment on, people were like, okay, we don't need to do that. I'm gonna just take that.
And it took a while for them to drop it too.
Yeah, but
the
people
industry,
use Stan Lee as a thing.
They always use that because he was against it from the beginning because of the whole.
And if Stan Lee, who is the master, is doing it, people were like, okay, you know what, the master is doing it. Look, I can do it too. I want to write my own stories, and I don't need somebody else to tell me, no, this is how I'm going to express myself and whatever. So free speech, whatever we're having in 2018 now, talking about free speech or whatever, Stan Lee was one of the first to do that. But we don't actually put so much attention to that because we always remember the stories or how he pushed the comic books into there, being charismatic and being on TV, so on the cameos, which are all cool. No, the cameos are cool.
And that's
but
the thing,
to me, it's more important those things that we don't so much talk about and appreciate that he actually did. No, which is like bringing gravitas to comic book characters, literary license. Before him, comic books were for kids.
Yes.
And
yes,
if you wrote big stories or even big words, Excelsior. No, I don't need that big word. Nobody knows it. Kids don't understand Excelsior, so he was pissed off about that.
Yeah.
He actually pushed those stories forward. Merchandise. The first guys to do I'm talking about 20 years before, at least 20 years before George Lucas do it. And we know George Lucas is awesome and whatever, but he did it.
But that's right. And look at Marvel merchandising. It is everywhere.
Now it's everywhere.
It's mainstream.
But in that time, buttons, shirts, Halloween things, lunch boxes,
shields,
music. Like a vinyl of marching band music. I still remember it. You can find it in YouTube or whatever. You know, like. So he always was trying to do that thing, saying comic books could be more than what it is for kids only. It could be more. It could be for teenagers. It could be for grown-up people. All the army people. We know he went to the army, and he always worried about those veterans that loved comic books when they were kids, and he loved comic books and Pulp Fiction stories. No, like Shadow, the Black Bat, Spider. All of them were his heroes. So he put all that sentiment of humanity into the comic book era, which was all about superheroes. Yeah, being more than human. Like he like. Okay, you're being more than human, but how can I bring you back to being a human so we can relate to you? Because people like the action, but how do you make him buy the comic book next time? Yes. You know?
Yeah.
Well, you want to see that to be continued. What is going to happen with this guy? How he's becoming this character? How he's becoming a better person, upgrading, and he brought all that into the comic book world, that now is more. Graphic novels and whatever. It's all about him. No? Graphic novel has his own section for adults and whatever. Is respected now, and I would say him, Ditko, Kirby, Bill Finger, a bunch of other people that we don't have so much respect for, or so much not even respect, because we don't even remember.
Like, just knowledge.
No? Knowledge would be the best word, because.
No, but that's what I was gonna say is that he, what I loved about Stan Lee is like I went to Comic-Con so many times, went to Fan Expo so many times, where he was there. I had the opportunity. I seen him from afar with the people around him, kind of thing. And it's one of those things that, like, at the end of the day, he was a human being. That's what a lot of people forget about this. Beyond Stan Lee as the comic book creator, This was a human being. He had his flaws. He had his things. He wasn't a perfect person.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he did stand for certain things, like he against racism and against prejudice and against all these other things, censorship.
And he put it in his
And he put it into his comic books. There's a lot of things that he talks about.
X-Men
in
is about
X-Men.
bigotry and
But it's
racism
just,
and
for me, it's just that, sometimes you don't want to meet your heroes. Sometimes you just want to look at him from afar, where he just stays in that.
Yeah, exactly.
Does it
in
keep
that
that
light.
mystery about him?
Yeah,
No,
it does. It keeps
but-
a mystery for me because I look at him like
More than a man.
I look at him as beyond like he's the creator, right? He is the man who created these things. It's the same thing as if I walked down the street and I saw Jack Kirby, if I saw somebody like Michael Turner or like Chris Claremont and all these different comic book people. Like, it's just, to me, I've never been the person to be crazy fan.
Yeah, I'm not fan crazy the other way.
Getting like signatures. Like I went one time to go
Tip
get
of the hat, handshake.
Yeah, exactly.
I appreciate your work.
Yeah, I
changed my
met
life,
Todd
yeah.
McFarlane like a while back.
Yeah, exactly. Todd McFarlane.
Remember
yeah, we all met
when
him,
we had
yeah,
that video
exactly.
thing, and
I remember that.
and I froze. Like, I literally, like, I went up to him. He signed my Spawn #1,
Yeah.
and I literally, like, he asked me, "Oh, how's the convention?" I just went, "Yeah, it's good." Like, I just it's too much. Like, it's just
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want to. And I shook his hand and I walked
Yeah,
away.
but
You gotta think that's all he wants too.
Yeah.
No, exactly.
But I
But
would
what
say
I'm
that-
saying is that
Stanley's the opposite. He always
Stanley-
worked for people to not look at him that way. He would always
No,
do
and-
jokes.
Always very
Every
humble,
interview
yeah.
is like, hey, what? And that's what I was saying before. That in every interview he would still remember things that happened in the 40s, 50s, and saying, hey, it wasn't me, it was this guy and whatever. And I think that for a while they were blaming him for saying that he was a creator. He was never. Anywhere that you can look.
I think it was because they had to license, like, because the people that were behind these when they started making money, Marvel, these Marvel characters became like super lucrative
Oh, yeah, exactly.
as a brand. I think what happened was that him himself was like, this dude started making comics to make money, to feed himself.
Yeah.
And then from there, he started creating these characters. And then from there, he created an industry. And then there's the company. And then there's the movies. And
He wanted to be a novelist.
yeah. So like, he started at this idea. I don't think the guy sat there and went, I want to create a universe where like there's freaking
No, not at the
all
beginning,
these
not
cars
at
at
the
the beginning.
Not at the
But from all these things that happened, eventually he was the guy who was more cooperative because he saw the grander vision.
Yeah, I think after,
He wasn't. He was.
yeah.
He was kind of like, okay, I'm willing to compromise with this, but let's take as
I-
long as the characters get
I understand-
licensed,
I
as long as
understand
everybody
what you're
gets
saying.
paid.
But not so much.
Whereas like I think Ditko and Kirby were more. They were rebels. They wanted to be in control. It's the same as like Layfield, right?
Yeah.
Like
No,
Layfield has the
I-
same
I-
kind of vibe, right?
I think Steve Ditko and Kirby, they knew they loved comic books from the beginning, even when it wasn't respected. Stan Lee at the beginning was just a job, and he wanted to be a novelist, and he knew he wasn't so respected. But after a while, he was like, all right, you know what? If I cannot be out there, I'm gonna bring all this respect that the literary world has for other things, novels and this and that, into the comic book. In fact, other people did it, but the first graphic novel Marvel ever did was him and Mobius from France.
Oh yeah.
And they did his favorite character,
Galactus.
Silver Surfer.
Yeah,
no?
Galactus.
They did a big thing about Silver Surfer. That was the first graphic novel about.
Okay.
What were they talking?
So they're talking about Mobius.
Mobius.
So when they did with the comic book Mobius, they had Galactus. I think it's called. It's not called Pestilence. It's called like something like I can't remember what the hell it's called right now. It's Pestilence or something like that, like a name like that. But I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
Like,
No, it
so
was
the
like
artist is
one title,
Mobius.
one
Who's the
title,
person
one
that
title, yeah.
does the art. Who's
Yeah.
a famous European
Who is
artist.
a European? Who is like a
He does a lot of like stuff like with heavy metal. So like
Okay.
that magazine, like
That kind of,
like that.
yeah, but
style.
I think the story goes that both of them were really kind of like too excited of meeting each other. Stan Lee knew that he was like the auteur genius of Europe, and everybody wanted to work with Mobius. And when Mobius went to Stan Lee, so he was like 3 times, 4 or 5 times as excited as Stan Lee was. But when they got together, and Stan Lee was still in his prime creatively, and Mobius, no, let's not talk about this guy. So it was like an amazing creation of mix of literary like top of the game and are in top of his game. That's what I said. Like that's why I said that book is considered the first graphic novel that Marvel did, because they didn't do it on comic books, thinking, okay, this is the episode, this is another episode, this is another episode. Let's see what my character tells me. No, he knew what we were gonna do from the beginning to end, and what we were talking before, it was not so much action as Silver Surfer kind of like thinking about life and philosophical situations and spirituality and space stuff and everything mixed. No,
I just think that him creating beyond Silver Surfer, like Norrin Rad being a pacifist in itself as a character for Stan Lee, it was just such a clean slate, because it's a character that it has no, there's no color, there's no nothing.
Yeah.
It's just like a total, bare slate for him to be able to go out there and then go into the universe and
never
explore.
thought about it that way, but yeah.
Like and for him, after having X-Men and exploring racism and prejudice, and then having the family issues with Fantastic Four, and then the moral issues with Spider-Man, I think that's why he wanted that character to have, like the Silver Surfer, who's like, it's cool, but at the same time it's very, like an exploration of the condition of emotions and everything that has to do with the universe, because Silver Surfer as a character starts off making basically he sells his soul to the devil.
Right.
Galactus is not
making
and that's the thing. It's we at the beginning you see the Galactus as more like a destroyer, not necessarily evil, but at the same time you do look at Silver Surfer, what he did to save his planet. He said, okay, well, basically spare them and I'll find you something else.
Yeah.
What leads him to Earth, and his decision of doing that and hunting that.
You know what the great thing about Stan Lee was?
He put it all together.
He understood that every great hero is only a great hero because of a great villain.
Oh yeah.
How about that rogue gallery? The rogue gallery of Marvel is fantastically huge.
Especially
Oh,
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man's Rogue Gallery is probably the best Rogue Gallery.
Right, but that's just one.
The only one
he has, for every one hero,
Yeah.
there's 5
And
to
probably
10.
he has the best villain ever created, Doctor Doom. It's gotta be the best to me.
Yeah,
And I know there's a bunch of,
it's
and sometimes I feel like this villain is, but every time I think about villains, Doctor Doom, like.
So he's like this. That's the guy at
That's
the
the
end
guy.
of everything.
And
It's
he's not even like crazy, because what they did in the last Avengers movie is they brought the sensibilities of Doctor Doom into Thanos. Thanos in the comic books is a very Shakespearean villain. Very Shakespearean. He talks like this and death.
Well,
life,
different motivations, right?
different
Like he was doing
motivations.
it for death, so he wanted to
When
kill.
in the movies he's more
It's,
systematic, and once again we were talking the other day about it, that Magneto kind of the same thing. Doctor Doom, Doctor Doom, what he's doing is for his country, Liberia and whatever. And if you go to Liberia and you ask him, everybody's gonna vote for Doctor Doom.
Yeah.
But around the world, nobody likes him. And but he doesn't care.
He's like Namor.
What is it? Like
Namor.
a Doctor Doom is like a Trump.
No, he's like Namor. Like basically, he's like Namor. He's about he's about his people. He's about
like Namor.
Namor is the same.
And now, once again, if you ask the Atlantean people, he's like the best motherfucker ever. You ask anybody else, no?
No,
that's
as a villain,
of a real villain.
His motivations, like Doctor Doom, is a great villain. I don't think he's the greatest villain. I disagree with you, but like ever. But I think he is one. He is one of them because of he's able to plan like what he's doing. His plans are very systematic, right? And he has the mystic arts. He has his mental prowess.
He's just not like.
And he's always Mr. Fantastic. He has a great arch nemesis, which is
he's not
Mr.
like a Dr.
Fantastic.
Evil kind of bad guy.
No, he's not motivated by. He's not only motivated by world
I just want to
domination.
do bad things.
He just believes Doom is the same way that he refers to himself in the third person. Doom is Doom. Doom is he does Doom. That's it. Like it's just he does what he
and
does.
that's what I also like about Stan Lee. That all these villains are like there's something distinctive about every villain. This guy does this. This guy does that. This guy does this. This guy does that. No, and they are not the same typical bad guy.
I just see
the
also
good guys and the bad
I
guys
love
have-
his evolution. Also, when you're talking about his rogue gallery, it's great because you can see the evolution from his rogue gallery. When he creates Spider-Man, he has very like, some of them are, Green Goblin is like evil, and then Doc Ock is evil, and then you have Electro who's evil, and the Lizard, they're evil. They're all this evil. But then when you get to Silver Surfer, then you have like Galactus and all these other different characters that have like greater motivations to what the hell they're doing.
Yep.
They get to Fantastic Four is the same thing. Like Doctor Doom is more like there's very
Yeah, but
intelligent
even
like,
the
ways to
the
live.
Vulture, for example, is one of the early ones, but he was just poor and money for his daughter. I think Sandman was the same thing. He was
Yeah,
like,
no, and that's the thing.
So
Those
some
are
of them are
later.
like-
Those are later characters also in Spider-Man, right?
True.
But when you have the Fantastic Four and those
Yeah.
that rogue gallery especially, like who else is the bad guys for Fantastic Four? They have like Doctor Doom, Galactus. Who else they have?
I honestly
From
don't
all
know.
the old school ones,
Yeah,
you just have the Super Scrolls, like
yeah. You have like the
Yeah.
Skrulls. You have like like
Maybe-
more galactic threats.
maybe a Meso. I don't know if it's
Yeah,
like
Fantastic
Amado.
Four is more galactic, isn't it? They do
Yeah,
have-
yeah. They're
But
more.
you know what? It's archaeology galactic. Like
But it's not Earthbound like X-Men.
It's
for
not.
the
Yeah,
most part.
it's not about like for example, it's not Guardians of the Galaxy, no, which is like we defend the galaxy.
Yeah.
These
Yes.
motherfuckers are not trying to defend the galaxy; they're just trying to
It's near
discover new
space.
places.
Near space.
Yeah, it's like a Star Trek.
it's like Lost in Space.
It's
but-
like a Star Trek before a Star Trek,
Yeah.
no? Like just going across the world trying to find stuff around and see what's happening. The negative zone. Oh, this is a new planet. Let's go fucking fight. What's up? Oh, there's a monster in this planet. Let's fight against this monster. But the idea wasn't, oh, let's go over there and fight against the monster. It was, oh, let's go discover. Oh, monsters happen to be here. Action. You know, like.
yeah.
So that was
It was
like.
it was like Lost in Space kind of style also like
Yeah.
but the
I
final
think they were inspired on when it
the-
came out. It was from that area. Lost in
yeah
Space.
I'm pretty sure
And that was a big thing back then.
Yes,
So,
I would say that why it came
yeah.
together. He was like, all right,
Yeah.
Star Trek, Lost in Space, Twilight Zone.
but it's also him being able to take the things that are happening around him and then interpret them in a way that any person and any when I was a kid, for me, it really made me appreciate comic books
Yeah.
for what they were.
Well, I read. I'm sorry to cut you off there, but yeah, I read Marvel because of his characters and his stories. I wasn't really into DC. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
me too. Like,
Yeah.
When I started, I probably like on DC The Question and Wonder Woman probably, and they were because the characters were more human. Like no.
I think that's
Even
why
Wonder
I have
Woman.
such an affinity for Batman. He is
Yeah.
just a guy. Yeah,
guy.
a really rich guy, but it's not even an armored suit for the most
But
part.
but it's also
a lot of him kicking ass.
It's also
Well,
because
now it's a
DC
little
drives
more godlike, but back in the days it was
DC in the 80s and the 90s drove a lot of like adventure style,
Yeah. Adventure comics. Isn't that what they were called?
Yeah, but
Superman.
so that's how they drove it. It was more like, okay, let's go, like let's this adventure of this character, because they had DC has such a rich history and their characters are so cemented
Yeah.
in their ways.
Yes, where Stanley's
like,
characters were all newer.
now
characters, right?
in the last little while they have taken characters and
Developed
expanded
more.
them, developed them more because they had to, because Marvel did that. Image did that.
But
Or
again,
they brought
you said it right there. Marvel
Valiant,
did that.
yeah.
So they're
Yes.
always trying to catch Stan. He
They
was
have to. They
always
have
ahead
to.
of the
And
curve.
but even when he did stuff with DC,
Good one.
when he
Good
went
point,
to
good
DC and he did a lot of creative stuff with DC, where he reworked
Yeah.
Wonder Woman and he reworked Spider-Man and Green Lantern, and their main characters. It was interesting because he, his humanization of all these characters was always good. Having Superman is great as an omnipresent and all he can do superhero
He's
guy.
a god.
Basically,
He's a
yeah,
god.
basically he's a god. But they humanize it. That's why in Marvel we don't have Superman. We have the Sentry, who's a kleptomaniac who can friggin'
Right, but he's not there every episode, right? Like
No, they
Superman
can't.
is
They
always
can't.
They just
there, always
you
gone.
can't.
rewrote them, but even when they created the Sentry, for example, who is like a Superman or whatever, the point of the comic, the initial comic book was that he was crazy.
No, he
like-
is exactly.
And he's like, what would happen if somebody with the power of Superman is crazy, So it was kind of like that comic book. And
It was created as a hoax.
And when
It was
when it
created
was
as a hoax.
created, the Sentry was created as a hoax, as one character that it was lost in the vaults that Stanley created. It was lost in the vault. I remember because I was part of the. I was looking. Is it true?
It was
Is
in
true?
Wizard. It was in Wizard.
I
yeah. They
thought
had
it
in
was
Wizard.
true because they did it the same thing. They found pages, Jack Kirby style. So we thought actually it was like a lost character, and it wasn't. It was just a hoax, but it's just like a Superman thing. No, the same thing. The same idea. Okay, what would happen if we bring a DC comic book hero over here? But what would we do for people to actually be entertained and care about this character, and we make it more human? You know, like, well, that was our tribute about the great Generalissimo, Stan Lee. Please leave your comments down below. If you have any questions, please, and like he used to say, Excelsior, Geeks of the Round
Excelsior.
Table.
All right, we're good.